So welcome everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. This one's a little bit different from the others because we've got a whole panel of really practical examples, all drawn from Bristol Diocese, of churches that are actually got on and done things in their churchyards to help manage their churchyards, not just for people, but for nature as well. So I'm sure you'll get lots of practical examples and inspiration of things that you can get on and do today in your churchyard. Today's webinar is one of 12 that we're running this week, all themed around land and nature, because at the moment all across the country churches are taking part in Churches Count on Nature. We've got over 300 churches, all having people going out into their churchyards and recording the amazing wildlife and plants and insects that they find there. We thought that during Churches Count on Nature, we'd run this national programme of webinars to give people some inspiration and information about what they could do. In terms of the housekeeping, we'll be using the Q&A for your questions rather than the chat. So if you move your mouse around and find the Q&A, that's where to put your questions in, and you'll also see other people's questions there, and you can click the thumbs up next to those questions that you think are most interesting, and those ones will rise to the top. And the time that we have left after the panel have finished speaking, we'll start with the questions at the top and work our way down. After today's webinar is finished, I'll send everyone who's registered the slides and any useful links that are shared in the chat. And I'll also send you a little feedback link. It's really helpful for me if you can click through and tell me if the webinars hit the spot. And we're recording all of the webinars this week, and in the next few days they'll go on our website. You'll have to bear with me a few days because with 12 webinars it's going to take a little while, but we will be sharing all of those videos so that if you've enjoyed this session and you want to watch it again, or you want to send it on to colleagues, you'll be able to. A quick plug for the upcoming attractions. These are the remaining topics that we've got left this week, a really interesting range of webinars. So if you spot something there that you didn't know about, please do go through and book on. I'll put the link to the webinars into the chat when I've finished. And also to let you know that on Saturday, Sheffield Diocese is hosting an online eco-church festival that's linked to Churches Count on Nature. So again, I'll put the link in the chat. Please do click through and come along if you'd like to. And then other webinars away from the land and nature topic, which we've got coming up. We have one on heat pumps in July. We've got 3 eco-church webinars coming up on getting started, gaining momentum, and how it links with net zero carbon. And then we've got our 2 environmental fundraising webinars in September. The first on what opportunities there are, what funders are out there to apply to, and the second on how to start your environmental fundraising. Now that's quite enough of me. On to the main event. So today's webinar is being led by Clare Fussell, who is the Diocesan Environmental Advisor as part of the parish and external relations team in the Diocese of Bristol. And then we've got a really interesting panel drawn from churches across the diocese. I've got Mark, John, Matt, Catherine and Deborah here to speak to you about what they've done in their churches. So without any further ado, if I stop sharing my screen and hand over to you, Claire, to lead us away.
Great, thank you, Catherine. It's really good to be joining you today, and I won't talk for very long because I'm really looking forward to hearing from each of our 5 panellists, and so I'll hand over to those in a moment. I just wanted to give a bit of a background to some of the work we've been doing in the diocese. In Bristol, we've declared a climate emergency, and we're working towards becoming net zero carbon by 2030. And over the last year, while the pandemic has thrown us off course to say the least, I've been really encouraged by the number of stories that I've heard coming up from church communities across the whole region, from city centres to towns and villages and more rural areas. Churches across the diocese have used this opportunity to bring their communities together to care for creation and to use their land in creative ways and create something really positive out of what's otherwise been a difficult year. And in conversations with many churches, people have been saying that while their church buildings have been closed for worship, their churchyards have become even more of a haven for peace and for reflection and for reaching out to the community. And while we were locked down to our immediate neighbourhoods, many people noticed afresh the beauty of God's creation around them in their immediate vicinity, and I think people kind of gained a new impetus to protect and preserve that. So there's been opportunities springing up around the diocese to do more to preserve the environment. And we're going to hear today from 5 speakers from different church backgrounds and different settings. And while they're all talking about separate projects, they are also all linked, as they represent a wider movement in the church, which is spirit-led, which is an awakening in people to respond to the climate emergency and a passion to link their faith more deeply to the natural world around them. So I'd like to hand over first to Dr. Mark Siddle from the Draycott Benefice of Churches in Wiltshire to tell us about his experience and what he's been doing. So I'll just share my screen because I know that Mark had a couple of photos he'd like to share with you as well. And then over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Claire. You might like to spotlight my video if that would help, then you can see my face as well. You know, on my screen there's a few kind of block. There we are. That works fine, doesn't it? So one of the things for me is drawing on our passions around creation care from wherever they come from. And one of the things that I'm very keen on is cycling. In fact, we're a non-driving family, and so I cycle all around our patch. And being based in the middle of the diocese, I managed to cycle around the whole diocese. I never need to drive. Cycling is fine. It's good for mind, good for body. And so what I was looking towards was to connect this up. And I think we'll do this one first. Connect this up with ministry and creation care and see how that can be missional. So I bumped into someone in one of our parishes who's a City and Guild bike mechanic, and he was keen to run a bike safety and maintenance check. And so he was able to recruit 2 other friends, and along with them we recruited 2 other keen cyclists. So the engineers would overlook our amateur work, and so we were clear that everything was well put together. We don't get loads and loads of likes on our church Facebook page, but this got loads and loads of attention. It was a real nudge as to what people in the villages thought that church was about. We had whole families coming and getting their bikes fixed, including 3 generations of one family. Advertising was quite straightforward. It's a bit strange under COVID because we didn't want too many. But advertising through schools, vinyl signs around the villages and social media got us plenty of people. Over 3 hours, we ran a second one last month. Over 3 hours, we serviced 18 bikes, which is as many. We didn't stop working the whole time. And so to grow it, we'd need more hours or more people. It was really welcome, lots and lots of likes in Facebook, in person, and it really was a big budge in the way that church is perceived, where village churches especially might be perceived as a bit fusty, and to attract one generation, this really changed the way that church was perceived as caring about creation, having fun, doing something useful, especially in lockdown, getting people back on their bikes. And the good news is that for many churches, ecclesiastical, so long as you're using a City and Guild engineer, we found out that we were covered for this kind of event. So that was a really good thing. We'll have a look at the next slide, Claire. So that was one initiative, the bike safety and maintenance check. The other thing was bike stands. And for a lot of people, we kind of can get a bit lost in faculties and things like that. Whereas really you can think of a bike stand much more in the fashion as you think of a bench. And the picture there on the bottom left, you can see I've got a church bench which is fixed to the ground but movable, and so doesn't really clash with faculty kind of things. So option 1 you can see is the one that we've used in most of our churches, are these relatively low cost Sheffield bike stands, they're called, this kind of U-shaped stand that you'll see in many places. And we just put a bit less concrete in to the bottom of them, a couple of inches of concrete where they go into a hole in the ground, about 6-inch hole. And so it can be moved. It would take you a few hours to move it, so the bike is secure, but having it being movable means that it doesn't clash with faculties or anything like that. And is a relatively straightforward way to do it, and no different really to having a bench. Another option in a lot of places, say you've got a place where you need extra plants anyway, and really highlights the the bike stand are these plant locks on the right hand side. They're a bit more expensive, but there is nothing compared to, I mean, this would house 2 bikes very comfortably and safely. 2 car park places would be at least £2,000, and these come in more around the £200 mark. And so there's another option for you. If you Google plant lock and front yard company, you'll find them, but also we're going to send around the link for those when we send around our information. So I don't know, we're going to have questions at the end, Claire? Yeah, great. But those are 2 really simple ways of changing the way that church is perceived. Even seeing the bike parked there puts in people's minds that they might bring their bike to church. They might even come to church as families on bikes and have a safe place to park them. It is also, of course, a good, very visible sign that church is doing something about creation care.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you, Claire.
There will be time for questions afterwards, so do pop those into the Q&A. But now I'd like to move on to invite Catherine to tell us a bit more about the work that she's been doing to involve young people in the eco activities of the church. Catherine, over to you.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you. I'm a licensed lay minister in the Draycott Benefice, which is a group of 5 churches and 4 church schools. And we have a long-standing and close relationship with our schools, with ministry team members going in for worship and all sorts of things. So we decided we wanted to link our eco church activities with our schools. So we invite our schools into all sorts of things that we're doing, whether that's festival services. We've had outdoor rogation services, and a couple of weeks ago we had a wild church out in our churchyard, which was fantastic. So we always provide information and invite people and encourage them to come along. And during lockdown, we've also encouraged our schools to do things like a churchyard survey. Mark's already talked about Dr. Bike, and we have a wild church prayer walk. So there are lots of things that we can invite our schools to join in with us. A big move last year was in Lent. We wanted to have an eco challenge, which would involve our churches, our schools and our villages. And we wanted to particularly focus on how we can make changes in our lifestyle. Each of our schools responded in a different way. And so what we try to do is offer things that are quite flexible, because each school, like each church, has an individual character. Clearly lockdown interfered, but it didn't stop our Lent challenge carrying on. So just what you can see with some of the pictures, Fitzy Bear, who's sitting by the sink. One of our schools does a lot of social media, and Fitzy Bear is the mascot. And Fitzy Bear sent a message each week encouraging school children to do lots of different things. So we had a waste week. So Fitzy Bear encouraged people to litter pick. We looked at food waste. We looked at how we reduced our energy use, at which point lockdown kicked in. And what we ended up with was children sending in all their pictures showing us what they were doing, just to show that they carried on with the Lent challenge, because it really touched a chord with them. People were very passionate about it. One of our other schools, it was an inspiration to revitalise their green team. So you can see them digging away there. They created a garden outside their new mobile classroom. They've revitalised their pond, so they do pond dipping, and they've had other challenges encouraging school to collect pens in particular. So they've had lots of activities that we have done in partnership. We've sort of kicked it off, and then they've carried on down different courses that they're interested in. And more recently, you can see that there's some little bug houses or bird boxes being painted up in that corner. Our PCCs were very generous, and they bought bat boxes and bird boxes for 3 of our local schools, so that children either in school or for home learning could decorate these, and then they will go back into our church pots. So we try and involve our schools.
Sometimes it's just by sowing the seeds or asking questions or highlighting projects that they can get involved in, responding to opportunities. But it's really important to understand and have a relationship with your school first, to discuss with them and to be flexible in your response and to go with the flow when they have particular passions, because some of the children really, really do have a real heart for our creation and want to get moving and people to change their lifestyles. Now we're opening up and we can start to go back into our schools. It means we can work together, working on their garden areas. And excuse me, I've got one school that wants to create an outdoor prayer space. So that's been really encouraging. Just gonna have a quick drink. But what I really wanted to share with is the fact that we are sowing seeds and that inspires other people. You can see a young lady there with her thumb up. That is Lola. Lola did litter picking for the whole of this February, up and down the A350, and raised over £1,500 for the RSPCA. And she came to talk to our service on Sunday. We had a Climate Sunday service. And she has been really inspiring. People have seen her at work and she is inspiring her classmates as well. She's encouraged every single one of her classmates to apply for their green Blue Peter badge, and she's now received her Climate Hero certificate. So what I wanted to encourage you with is that you might start something, but you just never know where it's going to go, what people are going to take on board and run with. And the other thing that we highlighted was how we work locally together. So we have a new shop that's opened in Chippenham called Refashion My Town. And we invited the co-founder there to come along to our service and to inspire our young people, because their project is particularly to encourage people to be eco-friendly with their fashion, not to just buy cheap and throw away. So it's been fantastic to find different ways of working together and just see where it goes once you start asking questions. And I hope, I've got Claire nodding away in the window there. I would just mention that I know our diocese is working on greening with our schools. And while that might be something that comes top down, if we can link it with our young people's passion, things will change on the ground. So be encouraged.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for that, Catherine. And it's been, yeah, such an inspiration to see how the young children have run with this and led on some of these initiatives, not being top down at all. It has been kind of coming up from what the children's passions are themselves. So that's really great to hear. Thank you. I'd like to hand over now to Matt. Matt Stone is a curate in the North Wiltshire Mission area and has been doing some work with Wild Church. So I'll hand over to you, Matt, to update us. And as ever, if you have questions for any of our speakers, please do put them into the Q&A. Oh, sorry, is that right? Or is it supposed to be Deborah next? Oh, maybe, sorry, I think that was my mistake. I think actually, Deborah, it's over to you. So Deborah is in St Matthew's Kingsdown, and she is leading the eco work there. St Matthew's is a city centre church in Bristol. So I think I need to stop my screen share and hand over to Deborah because she has some slides to share with you. Thank you.
I have some slides, thank you. Yes, I thought I was after Matt, but here we go. Yes, we're in central Bristol. Let me just find my PowerPoint quickly. Hang on, just a minute. Okay. Can you see that? You can, good. So St Matthew's Church is, I've been there about 2.5 years, is in Kingsdown in central Bristol. We gained the Eco Church Silver Award in 2020, which was just fantastic because we'd only just started the year before. The church was built in 1835, it's grade 2 listed, and in those days it was in a rural situation on a hill overlooking the medieval city centre. It's now central Bristol and surrounded by Georgian, Victorian and modern housing. This is the east end of the church, and you can just see there are sort of waist height or just slightly higher than waist height railings around the garden. The tower isn't nearly so obvious from that place. Historic terraces are only a couple of 100 yards away from really utilitarian social housing, which was put up in the 60s and 70s. And there's considerable deprivation in the area. There are many flats, most of them without gardens. Even in these beautiful old buildings, there are many, many flats. It's loads and loads of flats. And the parish is a real mix. It includes leafy streets, social housing, beautiful houses, student accommodation, 2 hospitals and a men's hostel. We have no church schools. There's one primary school which isn't very keen on the church getting involved, so we don't go in, although we did in the past. It borders the A38, a major artery of the city, and 2 major shopping areas. That's the big hospital. Now, the demographic profile is quite unusual. This is from the census 10 years ago, and it'll be interesting to see if it's changed. 64% of the population are aged 39 or under. There's a large student population. We have 2 universities, plus young professionals, leading to a highly transient population. And 52% identifies having no religion, and that's very much higher than the national average, and indeed the Bristol average. And about 35% consider themselves Christian. Now, most of St Matthew's congregation is the opposite. We're aged over 40, plus a small number of children. The congregation is quite small and doesn't reflect the quite large population of around 12,000 and the high number of young people. So there's some work to be done. We're very fortunate, and I'm very sorry about the quality of this. It's a very gloomy day. I'm very fortunate to have a garden on 3 sides of the church, which has never been used as a burial ground. It has 3 distinct uses. The south side, which you can see here, is a lawned area for gatherings and events and where children can play. The east side, which you just saw a sight of earlier, is a play area for the preschool, which uses our building during the week. And it's an all-day thing. I think they stop about 3:30 or 4. And on the north side, which I'm going to talk about more, is the garden, which is on the shady side. So the Eco team was formed just over 2 years ago, and we did the audit for Eco Church and immediately saw the possibilities for developing the gardens for wildlife, for the community, because we're a little bit divorced from the community, as you can see, and for church use. It's been used over the years for various events, but we want to open it up far more for both church and community. And the garden may help in connecting us more with local people. So I'm going to show you this little video. It's a little bit jerky, and that's because I'm using the cursor. So this is the south side. I'm going to walk you through this. Along the wall of the church, we've planted, you can see normal kind of perennials and roses, that kind of thing. Now this is towards the east end. There's a Wendy house for the play school, picnic table, a sand pit. And then rather beautifully here, they grow things every year. So the strawberries, potatoes, chives, or tomatoes, all sorts of things. And then there's a little play area there where you can see they're playing at being, gardening and kitchen type thing. This year we have put in these 2 gates, 2 5-bar gates, which open to the wild garden. We're protecting it, obviously, from children running in and out. You can just about see a bird feeder there. And this has also happened this year. We have rotivated this area and weeded it and taken out all the tiny little saplings of trees. I didn't get involved with this, but other people did it. And it's quite a long area. It's the length of the church, and seeded it with a wildflower mix. It's quite nice. And we've also got this wonderful bug church, St Anthony's bug church, which is an easy thing to do if you've got bits of wood lying around and somebody's quite handy. You can see also that houses back, that terrace I showed you is actually the terrace which is here, and it backs onto the church. And in the past, I think people came in and out quite a lot. This is more notices about the wild garden. And you can just about see the, sorry, oh gosh, I've lost it now. We've got a water butt. I'll just whiz it on again, just a minute. We have the bug church, and then obviously we need to water, so we have a water butt. This is the forecourt of the church, and you can see it's really surrounded by housing everywhere. Lots of cars. We've put in a bench for people, and I'll talk about opening it in a minute, the church, the garden. And then, of course, you can see actually a wild garden is really quite untidy. I'll talk about that in a minute. More bird feeders. This is a really untidy area, but it's full of perennials. These are red currants, which are a native species. A bug post, which is easy to do. And place for worms. And we put in this, this hedge by the gate, which has about 30, if I just go back, about 30 or so, or more actually, plants, maybe 50, for a native hedgerow, which we got permission for. We would like to put in a pond, but we will need a faculty. And that's the south side again. So I'll just move on to the next slide. So the successes have been that we've had a badger, we've got a family of foxes at the moment, a hedgehog, many birds, several wild bee species, lots of invertebrates, which are fantastic, because without insects, gardens don't work. They can't work. Nature can't work. There have been conversations over the fence from those people who work in the garden. There's real interest from the local community, from passers-by. Our approach is to go for perennials rather than annuals, because that is really how it works in nature. There are annuals, but you know, you need the perennials. We hope for a pond, which will need a faculty. And then just a couple of weeks ago, we had a successful grand plant sale where the whole church got involved, growing vegetable plants, garden plants, and house plants. Everybody got involved. We had a tea tent, and we raised over £800, which was amazing. So some of the challenges are the foxes, actually. Bristol's urban foxes are legendary. They really are. We have currently a vixen and 5 cubs, which we think are living under the church. They're beautiful, but they're often very destructive, and we've lost some plants. Wild gardens are not tidy and may not look very pretty. That's what I showed you earlier. So people expecting a colourful, romantic kind of view, like in the movies, will be disappointed. This is part of our education. They need to be untidy. There needs to be a lot of nettles and brambles and that kind of thing. But there are lots of hiding and nesting places for creatures among the nettles and brambles and the leaf litter. The more species there are, the more robust the ecology will be. And a final challenge, and this is just to scoot through, but we can't open the garden on weekdays until late afternoon because of the preschool, because that's to do with safety for the children. So that's a notice we put up for the grand plant sale. Very, you know, just very brief notice for the public, but they could see what we're doing. And this is it. This is the grand plant sale, where this is the first time we've been able to open the garden in such a long time. And it was hugely successful, as you can see. There were hardly any plants left over. So our top tip from St Matthew's is get a team together. It's far easier than going it alone. And I'm sure everybody here today on the panel will agree with us. There are always a few people quietly passionate about creation in every congregation. So the thing is to have those little conversations as much as you can and find out who those people are. And that's it.
Great, thank you so much, Deborah. It's wonderful to have a tour of the church and look at the gardens. So thank you so much for that. I'll share my screen again and go back to the slides. And it would be great to hand over to Matt, sorry for the rejig of the order, to tell us a bit about what he's been doing in Wiltshire around Wild Church. So Matt, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Claire. So Wild Church is a little bit different, I guess, from some of the other things we've been talking about so far today. It's new and it's fresh and it's growing, and we are taking tentative steps to become a fellowship and a church. At the moment, it's small, but I think it's beautiful and it's wild. So the idea for Wild Church came together during the lockdown, especially last year. It was clear from talking to people who were in lockdown of various different degrees that so many of us were spending more and more time outside and in the wild, learning to appreciate nature in new ways, exploring new wildernesses, and encountering God there. There was a real sense that God was doing something with this. We were meeting God in unexpected places, and also feeling the nudge to do more to get involved in climate change and tackle climate emergency. So we were talking, some of us in North Wiltshire and Woodbridge and at Malmesbury Abbey were talking, how could these individual wanderings come together and how could this become church? So, so the idea for a monthly service popping up in different wild spaces across the deanery developed. And I guess the model that we're following is working with different churches in collaboration and facilitating Wild Church, either in churchyards or in local spaces, in local wild spaces that have some kind of connection with the churches that we're working with. And what we're trying to do is grow the community as we go. So as we do a different church each month, people might come with us, and then we're kind of building a team in that sense. And this is how we're getting people involved. It's been a challenge to build a team in lockdown across such a wide area, but it's kind of happening organically, pun intended. Yeah, we are hoping that we'll become a fellowship across different churches and areas, doing Wild Church together. So far, we've managed to do a walk of peace, which has been used, I think, in over 15 churchyards across the deanery. We've done an outside kind of deconstructed Christingle service just before Christmas. And this was done on a farm. We've got a picture of that, I think. Picture of that wall. Oh, there it is. So we had 3 different fires and 3 gatherings around the fires of about 20 people each, and there was sparklers and it was good. There was lots of people. I think we had about 60 people, which was our limit, which was our maximum amount in COVID kind of times. And recently, as Catherine said, we worked with St. Peter's in Kingdon Langley on Trinity Sunday, and we did a service in the churchyard, and there was a picture of a face. Yeah, that is Jesus, maybe, who knows, but so we put that together as one of the activities, and that was really fun. While we weren't able to meet together, we made some videos. I made some videos kind of looking at the elements, and we did fire, water, and dust and earth, which will be sent around in the email that everyone will get afterwards. So each time we meet, there are things that there are kind of elements that we kind of want to make sure are part of each kind of gathering. Firstly, it's an act of worship. This is church. We're not trying to say this is an addition to church or a kind of alternative church. This is church. So we want to kind of be clear about that. We want to make sure we're interacting with the natural environment and finding God there. The Bible is full of metaphor and imagery using water, fire, earth, dust, wind to talk about God. So we're kind of interested in using those biblical images in our worship. And thirdly, each time we want to really be challenging ourselves and others to think about climate change. What's God's heart for climate change? Discussing perhaps new habits or tips for individuals and families and groups and churches. And I think lastly, what's been really striking is that we've really quite quickly developed a culture that seems to be really positive. And I guess if I had a tip, I'd be like, stick to the things that are the DNA that you think are really, really important. So for us, I think it's the intergenerational nature of Wild Church, the kind of the cross learning. I guess with climate change, there's a real opportunity for kind of cross learning between generations, as children kind of know more than their grandparents maybe, which is super exciting and a great way to imagine how church could work. It's a bit messy, it's informal, and it's for those who perhaps want a change or a break from usual church. I just want to read just a couple of lines to finish up what we say on the webpage. We'll be finding places of worship and connection in the wild places of North Wiltshire. This will be church, but maybe not as you know it. You will need wellies and a raincoat. It's ideal for families and children and anyone else who's happy to get a little muddy. Dogs are welcome. It's about joining in and thinking about creation care together, meeting with our Creator in his garden. And I think that's it from me.
Wonderful, thank you, Matt. It's fantastic to hear about how many churches are building this network across Wiltshire and calling it church, which is great. Thanks so much for that. And I've just been scribbling down a few questions to ask you at the end. I'd like to hand over now to John. John White is the Reverend in charge of Hazelnut Community Church, and this is a community farm across Bristol, and John will tell us a little bit more about what he's been doing and a conference that's coming up as well. So over to you, John.
Yeah, hi, I'm John. So I'm technically the curate at St. Mary's Stoke Bishop in Bristol, but I've been released to do this full time, which is really exciting. The idea kind of came about 2 years ago. I was at a city farm and I just looked around and just thought, this is beautiful. This is so much community happening. And it just felt almost like old monastic communities. And I just thought, what if this happened, but with a sacred space? And this is kind of where the seed happened. So it's been over 2 years now that we've been kind of thinking about this. And we launched during COVID last September. So basically, I think one of the main things that really influenced me was this recognition that climate emergency is real and that it's the issue that be facing me as a minister in this time. And I think when I had that recognition, it changed my perspective on the things that I do and the way that I minister. And it felt very much that it was important that we shift into new territory and try new things for a world that is changing and for the new trajectory that we're on. And we just have to acknowledge that. And yeah, we're in new territory. So so Hazelnut Community Farm, basically what it is it's actually a network. So we've got about 6 different growing projects, and I'll explain what that is. You've already heard from Matt, who's one of our partners. So his Wild Church is a part of Hazelnut. I look after 2 sites in Bristol, one that are very urban. That one is on council land, another on church land. We also have someone on an estate, church planting in Sheffield, and someone connected to a cathedral in Wales that set up a secret garden. And so there's a whole variety of ways that this can look and be. But what we kind of do, if I could explain it in 3 ways that what we gather around is kind of land, community, and resources. So let's kind of maybe start with land. So we are this network, and what we're looking to do is to take small or medium pieces of land and transform them. So it could be that you are worshiping outside, like what Matt was talking about, a wild church, or you could actually be starting a community garden that is a church. So it's, we literally think what we're doing is church, and it's been exciting. It's been exciting to find ourselves outside worshiping, and actually, it feels. What we started was, let's just give this a go and see how it works in this age of climate emergency. And what's happened is we've had our lives just open, our spirituality and our time with God just come alive as we've prayed and worked together outside. It's just been a beautiful kind of growing time for us. So if we think about Bristol and the land that we do, in the ones I look after, we grow food, and the idea is that we grow it to give it away back to the communities. So our commitment is to give away a minimum of 50% of the food that we grow, and we're hoping to give away most of that. And that's one of the distinctions of the network, is each person that signs up, the food they grow, they give away, and they're distinctively Christian as well. So we've got land, and that's really exciting. And we take care of that, and we've got these growing projects. So that's kind of the land, and it's beautiful. I mean, doing prayers outside and listening to birds sing, there's nothing like it. I highly recommend it. The next thing we do is that we're a community. So not only do we grow to give as a community, and that's why we call ourselves a community farm, because what we give completely across all of our sites is our harvest. But we're also looking at being sustainable local expressions of church. So very much like the parish model, but imagine in a world where food is scarce, how do we look after the land that we have? So we're encouraging the Church of England to actually take and use their land as areas of producing food for future food insecurity. And that's what we want to encourage people to do. So we're growing to give. And so that's really exciting. And a part of our community too is that we're not kind of doing this alone. So we're a partner in action with Arusha. We're connected with Clare through the Diocese of Bristol. And we're also have partner churches and loads of different people that play a part in what we do. The third thing that we do, so we've got our land and our community that's formed. We've got resources. So if you ever go on our website, you'll see the link in a minute. We've got a resources tab. Everything that we do, we seek to recreate and give it away for free, whether it's videos or liturgy or resources. And part of this is that as we're in a climate emergency, it's not about building our own kingdoms. Why would you do that in an extinction level event? So we're about giving it out to let loads of people be successful and grow. We've got a conference coming up that you see, Sustaining Church. It's also free, and we've got an amazing range of speakers, and the program will be sent out, and you can get free tickets on our conference on our website as well. So please do sign up for that. We've got an arts project that we're starting that is going to be touring churches in Bristol, thinking about kind of creation care and art and how to engage the communities in different ways. And that's being made possible through a grant through Bristol Diocese. And the last thing that we're doing, and then I'll kind of give you a really practical thing, is that we're starting something called Potting Shed. This is hot off the press because it's launching at our conference, but it's basically a year-long, 1 hour a week course that you can go to that we're leading with Arusha and different partners in order to help people start growing projects. So if you're a church that wants to start using a piece of land, or if you're an individual in your allotment and you want to think, well, let's see how this could be church, this is the program for you. And so you can get in contact with me. I'd like to tell you about it. So I've just kind of given you a whole bunch of like this, that, or the other, and I could talk forever, to be real honest. But I want to kind of tell you about Monday real quick. Monday was a drop-in at one of our sites. It's a really urban site. It's an area of deprivation. And we have been taking care of this little piece of land and getting it going since we've come out of lockdown. And we wanted locals to drop in. So we put it out there, and it was one of the most stunning experiences of church that I've ever had, because it was so easy and so beautiful at the same time. We made contact with 12 different people. We gave away 10 different tomato plants to locals to grow. We had one older lady come and have lunch with us, and she brought us a mint plant and said, "Can I bring my piece to add to your garden?" And it was just beautiful for us to talk about mint. We had a placement student who's trained to be a vicar along with us, someone who's just been ostracized or kind of leaving church but wanting to come back, who's working alongside of us. We had a number of locals who wanted to talk to us about issues within their community, talk to us about nature and what they grow and what they could bring. And what it felt like was this like ease of community happening outside, instead of it being kind of this awkward moment at the back of a church with coffee, who are you? We just had all of these beautiful conversations, and they were very clear that we were church, and we talked about climate emergency, and it was wonderful. And so, yeah, I highly recommend it. having a go at starting a community garden as church. It's beautiful. Cheers.
Wonderful. Gosh, thanks so much to all of our panelists who sharing your inspiring stories. I've just been entranced listening to you, so thank you so much, and for sharing your tips for others as well, because each of you have things that I think we can all learn from and pick up from. And I've just been noting down a few themes that I think have come out from all of your projects, even though they're really different and across urban and rural environments. And one is around young people and outreach. And I think that theme that comes up strongly from every time a church goes outside and opens its doors and worships outside and serves the community outside is that you're more visible to different generations and welcoming to younger people. And as part of our mission and outreach, I think that's so central. And another theme is through linking our land to our discipleship. I think that that's a new theme that I'm seeing from a number of our churches across the diocese and the country, that our churchyards aren't seen as something to manage separately from the life of the church and the spirituality of our environmentalism as part of our faith. And I think that having that, strengthening that link between our worshipping lives and our stewardship of the land is really inspiring too. And I mean, the third thing I think comes out really strongly from all of you is that sense of service to your communities, of providing space for others, providing space to come and be themselves and open up and have real conversations, whether that's about fixing their bike or about how they can explore God out in the outdoors. So I think that yeah, it's just been really inspiring to hear how those themes have linked across these really different contexts. So thank you for that. I'm just looking up through the questions that have come in, and we've had a number while you were talking. I think some of the links that people have been talking about will be shared by Catherine afterwards. So there's a couple of questions there about links to the bird boxes and also some links to the conference as well. Those will be sent out by Catherine afterwards. And if you could perhaps, Catherine Bloomer, send to Catherine Ross some details of the bird boxes, that would be wonderful, so we could share that with people as well. Another question that's come in is for Matt, and that is whether your project is part of the Wild Church network, because there seems to be lots of groups labelled Wild Church and Forest Church, and is it part of a wider network, or is it something that you're just doing in your group of churches, Matt?
It's just something that we do. We were looking for a name, and Wild Church seemed to fit, and we were aware that there were other things it's called Wild Church, but yeah, it's a local thing. Although I guess as we grow, we really want to kind of make connections with other people. But like John said, we've got a really strong connection with Hazelnut. But yeah, no, we're not officially part of any bigger Wild Church network. We just stolen the name.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions for Deborah about your church garden. One is, what's a bug post?
Well, the bug post is a bit like a bug church or a bug hotel. It's for solitary bees, I think, is one of the things, because all species, there are so many species of wild bee. The honeybee is just one species, that we know of. There were several species of honeybee, but of course everyone thinks of bees as being honeybees, and they're not. They're terribly important. The majority of bees are not domesticated. They're wild, and they're really, really important for pollination. And without pollination, our plants will all die. So that's what it's for. Yeah. Other question?
There was one which is around, what helpful hints do you have to other churches in a similar age and context to yours that don't cost a fortune? So where might people start? And a second one was, I've just closed the link. Was around the fact that it's the wildlife areas in the north side of the church and shaded, and they're planning one as well that's also very shaded, and do you have any tips based on that?
Right. Yeah, it's shaded not just because of the building, because of we do have trees. We've got a yew tree, a huge yew tree, and another one which actually I don't think we have anymore. I can't quite remember, but it was very, very shaded. So there had to be quite a lot of pruning, because yew trees really don't allow anything else to grow. There's something about them. You'll see the dead ground around them. I am not a fan of yew trees at all. I know they're very historic and people think they're traditional, but they don't. It's not like an oak tree, which supports over 300 species. If you can have an oak, that's much, much better. And it's deciduous, so you get some light and shade and so on. These yew trees aren't, they're very dense. I know they're very wonderful, but I'm not so wild about them. So yeah, there's a lot of pruning, there's a lot of cutting back, there's a lot of allowing light to come through so that the undergrowth would start to flourish, so that for example, the native red currant bushes would flourish, and we could plant, and it would be sensible planting that would survive. In terms of the top tips, was that about buildings? I think it might have been.
Yes, in terms of tips that for things that you can do that don't cost the earth.
Don't cost the earth. Well, for things like buying seeds for the wildlife bit that's been, or the wildflower bit that's been sown, we've shared the cost on that, because otherwise that could be quite expensive if somebody just donates it themselves. But we have shared the cost. Lots of upcycling, actually. There's quite a lot of upcycling. So the bug church, it was lots of upcycled wood that was just lying around in people's gardens and things like that. There's quite a lot of that that's going on. Top tips, you're not costing the earth. I think if you're going to plant a hedge, you have to look around for the best kind of product, while native, and but the smaller saplings will be cheaper, obviously, than large ones, that kind of thing. But we do a lot, we've got a couple of really, really handy people who are doing a lot of the hammering and staking and that kind of thing. So it's pulling people in, I think.
Yeah, I think that comes back to what you were saying earlier about bringing a team together and the importance of getting people together to donate their time and their plants and connections and things like that. Thank you. I have a question from Diane around how can we liaise with the diocese about planting trees on the glebe field. So yeah, do get in touch with me, Diane, and we can have a conversation about that, because there's been in touch with Avon Trees, I can't remember what they're called, Avon Trees for Nature or something like that, and they have some support for tree planting and some free saplings that are going for spare as well. So do get in touch, because we might be able to provide some trees for that. There's something from Francis saying that in Reading, Food for Family Growing Scheme has community gardens in 2 church grounds. That's it, sorry, Avon needs trees. So yes, are there any connections with other growing schemes that might be able to use your church grounds? So if there are community gardens in existence already, you can connect up with those, which is a great suggestion. There's a question for John from Jennifer around what form of invitation do you use to communicate with the wider community, because so many people aren't on social media. Just can you talk a little bit about how you reach out to people and invite them along to join Hazelnut? Yeah,
so we found that actually community gardens are an invitation in themselves. It's been pretty amazing. So the first one that we have was already community. Well, both of them that we have were already community gardens that couldn't be looked after anymore. So we were happy to come in and help. So they were kind of already in the community's mind. And I'm a firm believer of kind of people of peace. I think that's a biblical concept where you find somebody, whether Christian or not, but they are like the person that knows everybody and is open to sharing around. And so we kind of make those connections. And what we see ourselves is, again, not competing with other things that are happening and not trying to establish ourselves, but sitting alongside what's already happening. So even if, for instance, we meet at 3:00 on a Sunday, so that some people see what we do as their church, and others will go to church and then come to us, and we're totally fine with that, because we're not trying to compete with other churches. We think there's enough of God's beauty out there for everyone, right? So that's, and especially within a climate emergency. So yeah, so even with our drop-in, so we did find there's a Facebook group that's Love Lockleys, and so we shared it on there. We make connections with the local play area and the local hub, and we do lots of that meeting and stuff. I also found just being around, there's loads of connections and being open to conversation. So even though I love doing the gardening and everything, if someone comes around, I put my spade down and I take my time to chat with them. And that's really what it's about. So it's not about just finishing a task, it's about being present and available. And that's where you have loads of great conversations. And we found in some of the areas too that everyone's kind of linked together. So one person shares, and then someone else will come along and go, oh, Pauline said that you guys were down here, so I thought I'd come and say, it's that type of thing. And that's really helped us as well. And I think, I guess 2 more quick things. Like, I think just the longer that we're there, it'll be better. And I forgot what the other thing was. So that's all I have to say, I guess.
Well, thanks, John. That's really helpful. I think we have one final question. I'm keeping an eye on the time, and that's around getting a team together, and particularly around bringing young people into your planning and your work around this. And this is something that I was going to ask as well, whether you have any tips about how you get people behind this and pull a team together, and whether you open to the panel, really, if anyone has anything to share. John?
I was going to say, for us, one of the things that we do is being out in creation is itself open for young people. And so we make a choice not to have specific kids groups, but we involve them in everything that we do. Even some of what we do is we create crafts, for instance, and we never say, now the kids can create a craft. Because what we've found is that there's loads of adults that want to go do that as well. And so we make it all inclusive. So people say, what kids things do you have? I don't say, well, we're going to do kids things later. We say, well, there's potatoes that need earthing up, and I guarantee you kids love that. So we try and see everything as inclusive for young people.
Wonderful. Mark?
Yeah, I think the key thing is listening and working out where people's passions are. That was where I picked up the link with the guy doing the bike in the village, and something that happened there is a mum came who'd had a divorce during lockdown, had 3 boys. The boy was using his bike, 16 years old, to process, going out and pounding in the miles. And she came and she watched every single thing that we did to fix the bike, because she wanted to know how to do that at home for herself. So the key thing was watching for that connection, because there's always a connection between God's creation and God's creatures. So where is the passion that you can help someone draw on? And then you build on that. So as you're building your team, you're watching, is this person passionate about vegetable gardens? Are they passionate about cycling? Are they passionate about birds? There's always someone who loves birds enough to come and fill the bird feeder in the church garden. So you're kind of drawing on people's knowledge, because there'll be someone who can, do an A4 of all the birds that you can see in the church garden and have that done as a I Spy thing for the children. There'll always be someone like that. And the other thing is, if you've got schools, it is a massive win, because the children are really engaged with this, not surprisingly. I mean, as a church, we need to be saying, we care about creation and we care about the next generation. If we're not kind of saying we care about creation, we're also saying we don't care about the next generation. The next generation need to hear that the church cares about creation. If you don't believe me, then the numbers are in. Young Christians want the church to be doing much more about this. Over 70% of the population want us to be doing more as a nation about this. So it is a huge kind of win-win. And so you want to get it where the team is fueling itself because of their passions and their natural kind of God-given draw to live better lives in creation. It's good for heart and mind, and it's real revival. In schools, this can contribute to science curriculum. So if you're working with schools, find out about the curriculum, find out about which years ecology and all this kind of stuff is taught in the science curriculum. It can feed into poetry and English, because there's loads of poetry and English around it, as well as RE. So it's a huge win, and that's where the fuel for it is, and that's what we're all finding out. We're all finding revival of churches as a whole, because this is a missing piece in our faith. So yeah, that's kind of building the team is kind of, as John's finding out, building a church, and as Catherine's finding out, you know, the young people are just loving to get engaged with this, and Matt as well. Okay, that's my bit.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing your passions and your experiences and the practical things that you're doing, as well as the sort of spiritual revival that you're talking about as well, and how it's impacting every part of your church life. So thank you all very much. We've run out of time now, but I think the links to so everything that we've talked about will be shared. And if you have any other questions, please do drop me a line, Clare Fussell at bristoldiocese.org, and I'd be very happy to follow up with you as well. So I think that's it from me. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you all. Thank you, Claire. I've saved the chat, so I've caught those links. So it's time to say goodbye. Thank you all very much.
Bye.
Thank you.